Welcome back, everyone. Mike McConville here again, Stratford, Ontario, Canada for String Tech Workstations. We have a 10-string Bartolex guitar, new to me, and it's a brand new guitar. There are several issues that need to be addressed, and I'll bring you into the loop as we take care of those issues. Now we're going to start with an edge dress, because those frets are literally protruding and sharp enough to draw blood. So of course this is a brand new guitar, so we, as always, need to sort of cover our tracks. So I'm just sort of confining, just masking off so that only the fingerboard, youch, only the fingerboard is exposed, so that we can take care of the edge dress. First, I'm going to make up a sort of protective caul that I tape into place to protect this mint soundboard as we do our work. And that eliminates any danger of scoring the top. So as you can see, we have the neck along its entire length and the body supported simultaneously as we take down those sharp protruding frets. Okay, this is one of several issues that need to be addressed. But the finish is actually bubbling off where the frets are pushing outwards. It is a brand new guitar. I don't see a country of origin, so I'm assuming maybe it's China. I don't know, but it's not playable the way it is right now. Colin is a long-time good friend, local guy, and customer, and spectacular multi-instrumentalist. And I think he was very bit alarmed when he got this thing, figuring it would be ready to go right out of the case, but that is not the case. Let's take care of this first. There's a couple other issues that need to be addressed as well, but we're starting with this. I'm going to make up a couple of little sanding sticks to kind of smooth that over. We have basically flushed that with the finish. So now I'm going to go over with some fine sanding sticks. Oh, there we go. That's a better angle for you. So I'm just brushing along here with the sanding stick. Just a tongue depressor with two-sided tape and sandpaper. Simple stuff. And of course, this being a classical guitar, no excessive force. I'm not worried about the instrument being crushed or cracked. It's held firmly in place without any danger to the finish or structural integrity. And I can just relax and concentrate 100% on the job at hand. We'll step that up to 400 grit. There we go, that's our 400. I'm going to step it up one more to 600 grit. There's our 600. So I have a tongue depressor, surprise, surprise, covered in leather, two-sided tape, and we're going to kind of finish up this edge with the emery cloth, and this will be followed up with 4-0 steel wool. That's much better. See, that leather actually flexes over those crowns and rounds them off nice and smooth. Much better. Now there's a very high likelihood that we're going to be removing some frets here, correcting the fingerboard, and then putting those frets back in. So let's finish this up first. Yeah, you can see with the lacquer bubbling there, so that's no good. That's got to be sanded out. I'm switching back to the 400 grit so that we get rid of all this bubbling stuff. Yeah, this is some type of a heavy polyurethane, I think. I'm going to go back to the file here for a second, so that'll take care of it. Yeah, that's doing it. So I am increasing the bevel just a little tiny bit on that outside edge just to make sure that we get rid of all that, every trace of finish bubbling. And that seems to have done it. Now, unlike the large leveling blocks that you get in your kit, I don't really adhere the sandpaper. I just kind of fold the sandpaper over, and I've got that leather-coated tongue depressor underneath, and that also kind of flexes and distorts as you go over those fret crowns while we smooth them out. Well, because we're going to be removing these frets to correct the kind of hump in the fingerboard, I'm not going to pad that French polish on until we're all done with the frets. Let's flip it over and have a look at the other side. That takes a chunk out of the wood, so you can imagine how much flesh it'd take out of your finger. Okay, let's mask it off. So we're starting by, same as the other side, confining the edge of the fingerboard so that is all that is exposed. And once again, for the soundboard, we've got to cover our tracks here. This is a mint, brand new guitar. I'll just let that float there, this end. Mask this off. That's pretty sharp. Whew. Just want to make sure I don't get in the way of the camera here. We are back to our leather-coated tongue depressor. And this side's going much better. That leather just flexes right over all those barbs and rounds them out in a hurry. Liking that. Now we're getting there. Well, that's about as far as I'm going to go with this edge dress. The frets are going to have to come out from about here to here, and we're going to have to correct that sort of hump at the neck junction. Colin was saying the way it is right now, a concert pitch, he can't play it. It's the action had to be raised so high to get rid of any dead notes that you need a vice grip for a left hand to play it. So we have to do something about it. Correcting that trajectory of the fingerboard where it humps up at the body is the best route to go. Okay, here's the deal here. There's so much discrepancy at this neck to body junction that if we took this out of the frets, this fret would disappear completely. The only way to correct this is to pull the frets, correct the fingerboard, and then refret. You know, the bass side is actually pretty good, but this whole area here needs to be corrected. So I'm going to remove the frets to probably up to about here, and then we'll correct this area and we can reinstall the original frets. Now, I have had subscribers in the past ask me if I ever use a black Sharpie. This is the only instance, and the only reason I'm doing this is because these original frets are coming out, the fingerboard is going to be corrected, and then the same frets are going right back in where they came out. So I'm using black to mark the bass side, black for bass, the bass side of the fret, so that when I reinstall, they go exactly where they're supposed to go. Out they come. Well, you know something? We've come this far. Those last 4 frets, I may as well take them out. And when I put that straight edge on there, I can see that there's a little bit of a dip in the center of that fingerboard. Yeah, we're taking them all out. Then we have complete control. We'll correct this area here, reinstall the frets. And I noticed that they have a radius on the bridge here. Well, that radius certainly does not match the fingerboard radius. So I am going to radius the fingerboard to match that saddle. And then we can go all the way across and sort of ultra tweak that intonation. A lot bigger job than either of us expected on a brand new guitar. Out come those last 4 frets. Gonna mark that bass side once again, black for bass. So they'll go in exactly where they came out. First thing I'm doing is I'm taking that radius directly off the crown of that saddle. So the convex radius that we're getting off of this will allow us to make a concave radius gauge for the fingerboard. So I'm scribing that line to create the concave radius gauge that we're after. To rule out any human error, I'm flipping that and tracing it again. And now we go to our drill press conversion kit sander. Just about there. So we're using that convex gauge that we took off the saddle. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Before we get started, there's something else I wanted to point out. So you can see that the fingerboard is actually concave. We're going to correct all of that. We'll have a perfect radius match to the saddle. The other thing that's kind of bizarre is this is not a crack in the fingerboard. This is actually a center joint. The fingerboard is 2 pieces of ebony edge glued to make up that width, which is not that unusual, but they didn't get a real good joint on that center line. We're going to get rid of the sort of concave shape of the fingerboard across its width. We're going to put a convex radius with the radius gauge I just made up. We're going to do that with the sanding blocks that you get in your kits. And as always, you get a play-by-play. Cheers. So the first thing we're going to do is take care of this biggest point of contention, which is right here. I don't want an 18-inch beam. I just want a little scrub block. We're going to take care of this big hump here. And it becomes less and less as you go over to the bass side. It almost disappears. It's still there, and that's normal, sort of neck to body junction, but this is the trouble area, and that is where we're going to start. So get rid of this in a hurry with an 80 grit. Now I am favoring the outside edge, and I'm lightening up my touch as I go to center because the center is actually concave. So we'll concentrate on the 2 outside edges and get that straight edge again in a second. And give me another look. Okay, so let's check that now. Definitely better, but there's still an issue right here. Yeah, still right here. Where's that? Well, it's the neck to body junction. Surprise, surprise. Now this is done. Over here on the bass side, perfect. We don't touch there, so it's just this area here. And I'm going to stick with this shorter scrub block. This is the second smallest block that you get in your kits. Okay. Now we're going to switch to a longer block, and I'm going to blend full length, and we're going to check that with a straight edge. I'll get my radius gauge out in a second, let you have a look. Just staying away from the center until we start to form that radius that we're after. Before I vacuum this all up, I'm going to save a bunch of this dust that we can use for filler to try and disguise that that open center joint. So I am just going to good. We'll never get a better match than that. So we'll just set that aside, and then we'll have the dust we need to fill that crack. Now we vacuum. Well, the real saving grace on this job is the fingerboard thickness is such that we will be able to create that radius. So we've got to take quite a bit off that outside edge. I'll start working down the two outside edges. The fact that it's actually concave, I don't know if the camera's picking that. Yeah, it is picking that up, but we're shooting for 100%. Well, what seemed to be an almost impossible task is gradually turning into a reality. So we've just about got that radius where we want it. And like I mentioned before, I'm working those outside edges and leaving the center. Just scraping. So I take the lion's share out of those two outside edges with the razor blade. I come in the case of this wide fingerboard, I'm coming in about 3/4 of an inch or 7/8 of an inch, just under an inch on both sides, and really taking down that outside edge to create that 20-inch radius, because as you saw earlier, the fingerboard is actually concave across its width. I can't believe they let that go, but we put so much work and so much detail into everything else, and you know, I mean, this is really amazing that they would let it leave the shop. It's not a small detail. It's what determines whether the instrument is playable or not playable. We still got a ways to go, but I wanted to show you. See, at the top end we're pretty well there. Pretty darn close just with the razor blade. And what I'm doing now is I'm starting to blend towards center. I'll switch over to a longer block. This is the longest block. 80 grit paper we got on here. So we've got our longest block now, and I'm going along the string path and working my way from the outside edge, gradually making my way towards the center. Oh man, we're getting really close now. from here up, it's done. Working from the outside edge towards the center. So now I've switched to 120. So we went from 80 and we're stepping up to 120 grit. And now I am being very careful to sort of concentrate on blending from that outside edge towards center. You can see by the wear on the sandpaper that this full inch is contacting. When I press down, that leather flexes and just naturally follows that radius. You saw at the beginning of the video that most of the trouble was right in here. An 18-inch long beam or a curved block wasn't going to do anything to correct that. We gradually spread out to the longer blocks. Now we're just about there. The next couple of minutes, this thing will be ready to receive the frets with a perfect 20-inch radius that will match that bridge saddle flawlessly. Okay, we are approaching the moment of truth. Well, what seemed to be impossible at the beginning of this job has become a reality. So now we've got our beautiful 20-inch radius end to end. And now when I run that straight edge across that radius end to end, we have reached perfection. All of that humping and lumping and impossible rocking and rolling and the concave curvature across, it's all taken care of. Now we're almost ready to put frets in, but there's a couple other things we need to address first. So all of these minute wormholes or insect holes, whatever insect it was that bored them, they'll all need to be filled. And remember that dust that we stashed away at the beginning of the video? So we'll fill in what's left of that center seam. The rest of the center seam actually looks pretty good. Looks a lot better than it did at the beginning of the job, that's for sure. There's another little wormhole there we got to fill. So we're going to swap this paper out. One of my subscribers recently asked about that. He said, is this a one-shot deal? No, this is a lifetime supply of sanding blocks. So we just put our two-sided tape on here, like so. Flip it over, slice it off. This is 180 grit that we're changing to for that sort of final finish on this 10-string ebony fingerboard. She's good to go. Well, all of the heavy lifting has been done, so we got rid of that horrific hump on the treble side that you saw earlier in the video. We basically straightened the neck end to end along the trajectory of the string path. We changed the concave radius of the fingerboard into this flawless 20-inch fingerboard radius, end to end. So we filled all the bug holes or worm holes or whatever it was with ebony, smoothed them over. We are almost ready to put frets in. One last touch that I'd like to do. So I'm going to stain the whole fingerboard with smoked ebony stain just to give it a consistency end to end. This is a very, very thin consistency, like a water consistency, penetrating stain. And this is going to just blend the whole thing in. This is my dry sponge. So this is not completely opaque. It's translucent. You can still see through it, but it's just given us a nice sort of consistent hue end to end. You can still see that center joint, but I can live with that. Get that beautiful radius on here. We're going to put our pilot frets in. You have seen me do this before. I'm going to put 2 pilot frets in and put a straight edge on here and get a read on the trajectory of the neck along the crowns of the frets. Okay, we have made a decision here. I've got my pilot frets in here. So I've got the 9th fret and the 3rd fret in, and they are the pilot frets, and they basically let us know the distance from the underside of the string to the crown. Looks really good. So I think we are going to go with this fret. This is a 100 wide, 51 thou high. These are the Jesscar frets. I get these from the good folks at Jesscar in New York, New York. A couple of reasons for changing frets. The original frets were they're kind of all over them. And there was that high spot, that hump on the treble side that we took care of when we leveled the fingerboard. So really, the original frets are kind of a mess. So we're going to go with a slightly higher fret because we have lowered the fingerboard by sanding it. Colin's going to be very happy with this. We've got that beautiful 20-inch curvature. The neck is laser straight right now. Both of those truss rods are loaded. So we'll determine the adjustment of those double truss rods once we're on the home stretch and the frets are in. We've got it tuned up to concert pitch. But the most important thing is we have adjustability. So it's laser straight. we back it off, we'll get a bit of relief, even with no strings on it. Let's get those new frets in. Okay, you can see we're moving right along here. I just wanted to give you a heads up. I have this lead puck with a piece of leather over top of it that I hold inside to support the soundboard and the underside of the fingerboard as I drive these upper frets in. This very last fret, I was able to just get a quick grip clamp and clamp it into place. So all of the tricky frets are done. We're at the 8th fret and making our way up. Now the nice thing about this Jesscar fret wire, it comes in a roll. I buy it by the pound, and it's a 22-inch diameter roll approximately, which gives you an 11-inch radius. So that radius is much higher than the radius of the fingerboard, which is 20 inches. This, by the way, is my rough cut, right? I don't leave an inch hanging out. I get it very close the first time through, and then when I go to do my edge dress, you're not jarring the frets loose on the outside edge. We have an 11-inch radius for a 20-inch fingerboard, which is perfect for driving those frets home and making sure those outside edges are good and tight. The other thing that's kind of interesting is the leather V-blocks support this neck perfectly. That wasn't premeditated on my part, it just worked out that way, but yeah, we've got 100% contact on that top edge, and this neck is fully supported as I drive those frets in. So I'm down to the 6th fret. I have the original frets that I'm using just to sort of get a read on a really close final length. Now the 3rd fret has already been installed. I did that earlier as my pilot fret to get that lay of the neck. So we're down to the 5th fret, but I just wanted to show you what I've got here. These are the original frets kind of laid out in order. As I said a minute ago, I use the original frets just to get a read on a close final length. There's my original fret, and there's the new fret. I cut it about 1/4 of an inch too long. It allows me to sort of trim it back. There's my original fret, and there is the replacement fret. So obviously I cut it a little long and then work it back. We'll get rid of that distortion in the tang. So I want to just kind of pan along the edge of the fingerboard here and show you that this is my rough cut length. It's the bass side, and this is the rough cut length on the treble side. I'm going to put that fret guard back in place while we do our edge dress. So put that protective tongue depressor there as well. And taping off the sound hole so we don't get any filings in the sound hole or into the preamp, because this is acoustic electric. Very gently. I just flush these up. So that's why I bring those tolerances that close. Just a few strokes and we're done. So you can see not a lot of resistance here, and that's why I cut those initial tolerances so close. As we did before for the original frets earlier in the video, I'll use my leather padded tongue depressor to take out any of the sharp stuff. Yeah, that side's done. So this side, of course, is much less complicated. It's protruding a little more than I like, but like I said, this is my rough cut. I'm bringing these down flush. At this point, you're really listening as much as you are looking, sort of waiting for that file to go from a crunch to a whisper. Just about there. There we go. Be sure we get that tang on the outside, anything protruding. I think we're pretty well there. Yeah, it takes a little bit extra time to get the tolerances that close initially, but when you get to this stage, it's well worth it. Just going to pull that back and get in a little tighter here. Make sure we've got that tongue depressor. That's not just masking tape. Oh, that's good. I'm happy with that. Good. Okay, we're going to flip it on its edge and do like we did earlier in the video and fill those gaps beneath the frets. This is how we set up to do the edge dress and fill those gaps underneath the fret ends. This is high heat burn-in stick that you can get from Richelieu under the Mohawk label out of Montreal, Richelieu. Well, the 120 took off all of that craggy stuff. Now I'm stepping up to 180 and smooth it out. So there's the leather on that tongue depressor, two-sided tape, and this is 400 grit, so we'll go 400, 600, and then we'll do our 40 steel wool and blend it all. I do go over those bevels because, as I mentioned earlier, the leather actually distorts and kind of flexes. It gets all those sharp barbs out on either side of the underside of the crown. Now, of course, I'll be hitting this with the buffer when we flip it on its back and do the final level. And yeah, that's feeling pretty good. I'm going to finish up with this steel wool and just get a nice uniform blend. I do use a tongue depressor when I get up here to sort of get in tight right down to the bottom. Got to be careful, don't want to be too rambunctious. This is just masking tape now. I don't have that tongue depressor underneath there. And it looks like we need a little bit more, yeah, we need a little bit more filler there. Looking good. That hot knife is still plugged in, so I got a couple of spots up here I need to refill. Got to be extremely careful here because I don't have that tongue depressor underneath the tape, so I can't touch the tape. So you heat this high heat lacquer stick up and you just let that flow underneath the fret tang and fill that void. The trickiest part, of course, is always right here at the body. You be careful not to touch the top. The rest of it's really good. We're done with that. Ready for French polish, actually. The French polish on the edge here will be the kind of last touch. So I've got some 80 grit, and so the tongue depressor actually rides along that tape. A little bit of a space there. You just want to take this craggy stuff down in a hurry without scratching the top. This is our 120. Here's our 400. Our steel wool. Good, liking that. Okay, let's flip it over and do the other side. Same deal on this side. Now I do have the tongue depressor underneath that tape so that I can get right down tight. Yeah, so this high heat stuff, you just let it liquefy and let it flow underneath the tang and fill the void. Like the other side. We'll take all that craggy stuff off in a hurry with the 80 grit. I just have this LED light that hangs off my my shirt and kind of lights up the area I'm working on. That's it for the 80 grit. Now we got the 120. I'm going to pull that tongue depressor off so that I can get in a little tighter to the soundboard up here. that's our 120. Here's our 180. .400 grit. Steel wool. I'll be patting some French polish on there, but for now I'm more interested in just checking how we made out with the lay of the neck and the action. That was the main reason that Colin brought it to me.